The Middle East was burning. But the spark that would ignite the rest of the world didn't come from the expected tinderboxes. It was day 5 of the war, and the world woke up to breaking news from a theater no one was watching. Not Tehran, not Tel Aviv, not the heavily guarded choke point of the Strait of Hormuz. The Indian Ocean. Thousands of miles away from the wailing sirens and the cratered earth, the Iranian Navy warship Dena was quietly cutting through the swells, sailing for home. It had just wrapped up a naval exercise in India, a peaceful diplomatic event, a show of international goodwill at the International Fleet Review in Visakhapatnam. Under the strict rules of the exercise, the Dena carried no weapons, no ammunition. It was entirely defenseless. It was just a ship heading home. It never made it. Lurking beneath the dark, rolling surface of the Indian Ocean, about 40 miles off the coast of Sri Lanka, the American fast attack submarine USS Charlotte lay in wait. The order was given. The torpedoes fired. The Dena was torn open and sank into the abyss. "104 Iranian sailors were killed in the cold waters. 32 survivors were eventually pulled from the wreckage by the Sri Lankan Navy. It was a historic, brutal milestone. The first ship sunk by a submarine in active combat since the Falklands War in 1982, and the first time an American sub had sent an enemy vessel to the bottom since the Second World War. Tehran's response was immediate and furious. Iranian leadership threatened that the United States would bitterly regret the strike. A prominent religious leader took to the airwaves, publicly calling for, in direct translation, Trump's blood. But threats couldn't raise a ship from the bottom of the ocean, and they couldn't bring back the 104 men whose families had just been shattered. Back within Iran's borders, the skies offered no respite. The strikes hadn't paused for a single hour. The United States and Israel had officially transitioned into what military brass dubbed the second phase of the campaign. Phase 1 had been methodical and ruthless, blinding and crippling Iran's ability to fight. Air defenses dismantled, command centers erased, missile launchers wiped out. That work was largely finished. Phase 2 was about tearing out the roots. The crosshairs shifted to Iran's industrial and military heart, its weapons factories and missile production facilities. On day 5, American Central Command General Brad Cooper stepped up to a press podium and delivered a reality check. Total air dominance. US and Israeli fighters could now pierce Iranian airspace at will. Any target, any time. Almost zero resistance. The numbers told the story. Ballistic missile attacks down 90%. Drone swarms down 83%. Iran was still throwing punches, but there was less and less weight behind them. But the cost was catastrophic. Operating quietly amid the chaos, the World Health Organization reported 13 health infrastructure sites hit. Hospitals, clinics, medical buildings, 13 sanctuaries for the sick and wounded, damaged or reduced to rubble in just 5 days. Across the region, the skies over Israel were still thick with fire. 9 distinct waves of attacks launched in a single day. 5 toward Tel Aviv, 2 toward Jerusalem, 2 more raining down on the south. These weren't empty deserts. Tel Aviv and Jerusalem are living, breathing cities. Families, schools, the elderly. Every siren meant a desperate sprint to shelter. Every muffled explosion meant holding your breath, praying the debris wouldn't fall on your street. The toll was mounting. 12 civilians killed, over 1,400 injured, nearly 3,000 forced to abandon their homes. And then there was Lebanon, spiraling into a humanitarian nightmare. Israel issued a massive evacuation order for the southern suburbs of Beirut. Hundreds of thousands told to flee immediately. Highways choked, traffic frozen, a city locked in panic. Then a statement made everything worse. An Israeli minister standing near the northern border invoked the name Khan Yunis, a city reduced to rubble, and warned Beirut's southern suburbs would soon look the same. Watching the edge draw closer, Lebanon made a desperate move. The Prime Minister ordered the arrest of anyone tied to Iran's Revolutionary Guard. Visas revoked, borders tightening. A nation trying to stay out of a war closing in. But neutrality was slipping away, because Hezbollah was still firing rockets from within its borders, dragging Lebanon deeper into the fire. By the end of day 5, over 300,000 people were displaced, and the number was still rising. But the true horror of day 5 was how the war began to spill over its banks, infecting nations that had absolutely no stake in the fight. To the north, Iranian drones violated Azerbaijani airspace. One slammed into the terminal at Nakhchivan International Airport. Another crashed into the dirt near a school in the quiet village of Shakarabad. Azerbaijan, a small South Caucasus nation, suddenly found the war on its doorstep. Furious, Baku summoned the Iranian ambassador. Diplomats pulled out of Tehran. Warnings issued. Retaliation promised. Iran's foreign minister scrambled to deny the strikes, claiming an Israeli false flag. But the radar tracks didn't lie. The drones came from the south. No one bought the denial. And then came the moment that changed everything. 2 Iranian Su-24 fighter jets, not drones, but manned heavy warplanes, screamed through the sky toward Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar. Al Udeid isn't just an airstrip. It is one of the most vital American military hubs on the planet. Nearly 10,000 US troops stationed in one place. The Su-24s never made it. Qatari F-15 scrambled, intercepted, locked on, destroyed. Both jets blown out of the sky before they could strike. But the implication was staggering. Iran hadn't fired from a distance. It had sent pilots, men in cockpits, on a direct run at 10,000 American soldiers. The rules of engagement had just been rewritten. Under this pressure, the Gulf began to crack. In Bahrain, a nationwide state of emergency was declared. Ports shut down, operations frozen. A hotel and 2 residential buildings struck in the capital, Manama. In the dead of night, in the United Arab Emirates, air defenses worked overtime. 6 missiles intercepted, 1 slipped through, and detonated on Emirati soil. The skies swarmed with drones. 131 detected, 125 destroyed. 6 got through. In Iraq, a drone struck a Catholic church in Ankawa, a quiet Christian neighborhood in Erbil. Ordinary people caught in a war that meant nothing to them. In the Mediterranean, Greece warships near Cyprus intercepted a swarm of drones launched from Lebanon. Further north, an Iranian missile tracking toward Turkey was blown out of the sky over northern Syria. NATO airspace, Christian enclaves, Azerbaijani schools, hotels, airports. The war's tentacles were wrapping around everything. Thousands of miles away in Washington, D.C., the shockwaves hit the bedrock of the global economy. Oil prices detonated, up 31% in a single week. Brent crude, the lifeblood of global industry, spiked toward $91 a barrel, a level not seen since 2023. Corporate giants panicked. Maersk, the shipping titan, halted operations across the Middle East. With the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed, oil tanks across the Gulf filled to the brim with nowhere to go. Analysts began flashing warnings. If the blockade held, the pumps themselves would have to be shut off. The human cost was impossible to ignore. At Dulles International Airport, the first evacuation flights touched down. Hundreds of stranded Americans poured into the terminal. Tearful reunions after 5 days of pure terror. And yet, somewhere in the very center of the madness, the calendar turned. The Jewish holiday Purim had arrived. Inside a religious school in Jerusalem, dancers spun and celebrated. Outside, sirens screamed, incoming missiles. But the dancers didn't stop. They kept moving. It was defiance. It was survival. It was human. Day 5 came to an end, with sailors resting in the dark depths of the Indian Ocean, a shattered church in Erbil, burning wreckage in Qatar, and a terrified world watching the oil markets bleed. 5 days. That's all it took to scar nearly a dozen nations. And behind the scenes, the chessboard was shifting again. Intelligence sources began to whisper. Moscow had entered the fray, feeding Tehran critical tracking data, troop movements, warships, aircraft. One war, but more and more hands reaching into the fire. Day 6 was coming.